Hello, and welcome back to Velvet Haunt. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that linger in the velvet dark, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, should I talk to her? That question had been living in my head for weeks. Every morning I would come to work, sit at my desk, open my laptop, pretend to care about emails, and then wait for Kiara to arrive. And almost every day she would sit next to me, not across the room. Not somewhere far away where I could safely admire her without having to worry about saying something stupid. Right next to me. Close enough that I could hear the tiny sounds her keyboard made when she typed. Close enough that I could smell her perfume when she leaned forward. Close enough that if I moved my hand only a few inches to the side, I could probably touch hers. Every time she sat down, my heart would start beating like someone was punching a drum inside my chest. Bookum, bookum, bookum. I don't even know if that is the correct sound for a heartbeat, but that is how it felt. So why didn't I just talk to her? Simple, fear, pure, never-ending fear. The kind that creates 100 terrible possibilities before anything has even happened. What if I went up to her and said hello? And she looked at me like I was some disgusting insect? What if I tried to ask her out and she laughed? What if she said something like, "You know, get away from me"? What if she told everyone in the office? What if the story spread? What if by lunch the entire floor knew that Figa had tried to ask Kiara out and had been destroyed in less than 10 seconds? I could already imagine people whispering. I could imagine someone making a joke about it in the company group chat. I could imagine my manager trying not to smile during a meeting. That was enough to keep my mouth shut. Maybe I was overthinking. Actually, I was definitely overthinking. Overthinking was one of the few things I was extremely good at. Confidence, on the other hand, had completely skipped me. Some people could walk into a room and immediately act like they belonged there. They could talk to strangers, make jokes, flirt, and somehow never look embarrassed. I was not one of those people. If confidence had been handed out at birth, mine had probably been accidentally delivered to someone else. Whenever Kiara sat beside me, I became painfully aware of every movement I made. Was I sitting strangely? Was I breathing too loudly? Did my hair look stupid? Was there something on my face? Did I smell normal? Was I blinking too much? Could she hear my stomach? It was exhausting. And the stupidest part was that she had never actually done anything to make me nervous. Kiara was friendly. She smiled at people. She joked with the team. She didn't act like she was better than anyone. That somehow made things worse. If she had been rude, I could have stopped liking her. But she wasn't. She was funny, smart, and somehow always looked good, even after spending 9 hours staring at spreadsheets. I had no defense. So I stayed silent. Every day. Sitting near her. Close enough to reach. Far too scared to do anything. We were so near, yet so far away. Sometimes I hated myself for it. I would sit there pretending to work while my mind screamed at me. Just say hello. Ask how her day is. Say something normal. Anything. But then I would think of rejection again. And I would do nothing. That particular afternoon, I was staring at my screen without reading a single word on it. My brain was busy doing what it always did, thinking about Kiara. I had just started mentally insulting myself again when something changed. Wait, was she looking at me? I kept my eyes on my screen. Maybe not. Maybe she was looking past me. I slowly moved my eyes sideways. She was definitely looking at me. My heart started immediately. Bokam, Bokam, Bokam. Then she said my name. Figa. My brain stopped, not slowed down. Stopped. Everything inside my head disappeared. No thoughts, no plans, nothing. Can you help me with this ad campaign? For a second, I honestly wasn't sure if she had spoken to me. Maybe there was another Figa in the office. There wasn't. I looked at her. She was waiting. Kiara was asking me for help. Me, of all the people sitting around us, she had chosen me. Of course I would help. If she had asked me to help move the building, I probably would have tried. Yeah, I said too quickly. Yeah, sure, excellent. Very smooth. Very normal. She turned her laptop toward me. An AdSense report was open on the screen. There were graphs, numbers, percentages, and all the other things I was actually paid to understand. Normally, I could look at that report and immediately start explaining what was happening. But this was not a normal situation. Kiara leaned slightly closer. The issue is that our CTR for this ad seems to be low, she said. I nodded. CTR, yes, click-through rate. A thing I knew, a thing I had explained hundreds of times. I looked at the report. At least I tried to. My attention immediately moved away from the numbers. Her eyes were right there. I had always thought they looked almost almond-shaped. That probably sounds stupid, I know. But they did. And when she smiled, which she was doing right then, my ability to think became even worse. She was still talking. I could hear words. Campaign, clicks, impressions, target audience. Something about the last report. I understood none of it. My brain had completely abandoned its job. Figa? I blinked. She was looking at me. Yeah? She pointed at the screen. So, what do you think? I looked at the numbers. The numbers looked back at me like they also knew I had no idea what was happening. I tried to force myself to focus. Come on. This was easy. Talk about the ad. Help her. Be normal. This was finally a chance to have a conversation with her. Do not ruin it. Well, I started. Kiara waited. I looked at her again. That was the mistake. Her eyes, her smile, the small way she tilted her head while waiting for my answer. And then my mouth betrayed me. I love you. The words came out clearly, perfectly clearly. Not mumbled, not whispered, not something that could be mistaken for another sentence. I love you. I freaking said it. My brain immediately returned to life just in time to understand what I had done. Oh my God. No, 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 take it back. Put the words back inside. Pretend it didn't happen. Fake a heart attack. Pull the fire alarm. Do anything. Kiara stared at me. I stared at Kiara. Silence, not normal silence. A huge, terrible, painful silence. The kind where you suddenly become aware of every person breathing within 50 feet of you. I could hear a keyboard somewhere behind us. Someone coughed. The air conditioner hummed, and between Kiara and me, nothing. She finally spoke. Isn't this the first time we're actually talking? I wanted to disappear. How could you love me? Excellent question. Fantastic question. Probably the most reasonable question anyone had ever asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing useful came out. Sore? Sorry, she kept looking at me. Kiara, just forget what I said. I quickly looked at her laptop. Numbers, safe numbers. Wonderful numbers. Yeah, so about the CTR, come with me outside. My stomach dropped. That was it. My life was over. She was taking me to HR. Of course she was. Why wouldn't she? Some strange coworker she had barely spoken to had suddenly declared his love while discussing advertising data. That sounded like exactly the kind of thing HR would enjoy hearing about. I imagined the meeting. Figa, Kiara has informed us about an uncomfortable interaction. I imagined myself carrying a cardboard box out of the building. My laptop. A mug. Maybe a plant I didn't even own. I couldn't lose this job. I had bills. EMIs, too many of them. My finances were already held together by hope and bad decisions. Listen, I said quickly. I'm sorry, Kiara. Seriously, could you just let this slide? She stood up. I just want to talk. That did not make me feel better. People always say they just want to talk immediately before something terrible. Parents, managers, partners, police officers. No good conversation ever begins with those words. But I followed her. What else was I supposed to do? She walked toward the cafeteria. I stayed a few steps behind her, mentally preparing my final words before unemployment. The cafeteria was quieter than usual. Most people were still working, so only a few tables were occupied. There was a small section near the back that was partly hidden by a wall and some plants. It offered almost complete privacy. Kiara walked straight there. Wonderful, a private execution. She stopped. I stood across from her. My heart was beating so hard I thought she could probably see my shirt moving. Now, as far as I could understand, the situation could go in only two directions. One, something unbelievably good was about to happen. Two, I was about to get completely destroyed. Knowing my luck, option two seemed much more realistic. Kiara folded her arms. So, Figa, I swallowed. You love me, eh? The way she said it confused me. She didn't sound angry. She almost sounded amused. Well, brilliant start. Yes, I immediately panicked. But don't take it seriously or anything. Her eyebrows went up. So your love for me isn't serious? No, wrong answer. Completely wrong answer. No, that's not what I meant. Then, what did you mean, Figa? I wanted the floor to open and swallow me. Unfortunately, the floor remained completely solid. I had two choices: denial or acceptance. I could lie, tell her it was a joke, say I had meant something else. Maybe I was trying to say I loved the ad campaign. Ridiculous, but possibly survivable. Or I could simply admit the truth. I looked at her. She waited. I took a breath. I am seriously in love with you. There, done, whatever happened now, at least I had finally said it properly. Her expression barely changed. No shock, no disgust, no laughter. Nothing that somehow made me even more nervous. Then she said something I was completely unprepared for. I love you too. I stared at her. My brain rejected the sentence. What? She smiled. I love you too. Eh? She laughed. I love you, duffer. That's what I mean. I genuinely wondered if every god and every religion had decided to support me at the same time. Buddha, Jesus, Allah, Shiva, everyone. Maybe there had been an emergency meeting in heaven. Figa has suffered enough. Give him this one. There was no other explanation. This was impossible. This was not normal luck. This was once in 1,000 years luck. Maybe once in a million. The woman I had been too scared to speak to had just told me she loved me. I stood there like an idiot. Kiara smiled at my expression. What? Nothing. You look like you just saw a ghost. I think I might be having some kind of medical problem. She laughed again. I couldn't believe it. Maybe she had liked me all along. Maybe all those times she sat next to me had actually meant something. Maybe all those moments when I thought she was just being polite weren't random. Suddenly, my entire history with her was being rewritten inside my head. That time, she asked if I wanted coffee. That time, she smiled at me during a meeting. That time, she chose the chair beside mine even though other chairs were empty. Signs, they were signs. How had I been so stupid? Then Kiara stepped closer, very close. "Come," she said. I blinked. "Come what?" "Give me a kiss." Figure, my soul almost left my body right there. A kiss. She had said kiss. With me. Figure. The same figure who had spent weeks being too scared to say hello. I looked around as if someone might jump out holding a camera. Was this a prank? Was the whole office watching? No, nobody seemed interested. I looked back at her. "Are you sure?" Her smile became wider. "Don't spoil the mood." Then she placed her hands around my waist. That was the moment my brain completely gave up. I could feel the warmth of her body. Her face was inches away from mine. Her breath touched my skin. I had dreamed about something like this before. Not exactly this. Usually there was less discussion about click-through rates. But still, Kiara leaned closer. I did too. My heart was going insane. Bokam, bokam, bokam. This was happening. Actually happening. Her lips were only a few millimeters from mine. I closed my eyes halfway. Then something felt wrong. Very wrong. There was a wet sound. Not a kiss. Something heavier. Slippery. My eyes opened. Kiara's mouth was no longer normal. For half a second, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Her smile stretched. Too far. The corners of her mouth pulled outward until they seemed to reach almost to her ears. Her jaw dropped. And kept dropping. Human jaws aren't supposed to move like that. There should have been bone stopping it. There should have been muscles. Limits. Kiara apparently did not care about those limits. Her mouth opened wider and wider. The inside was impossibly dark, not just shadow. Darkness. Like I was looking into a tunnel with no end. I tried to step backward. Her hands tightened around my waist. "Kiara?" Something moved inside her mouth. At first I thought it was her tongue. Then it kept coming. Long, thick, wet, a huge tongue slid out between her teeth. It looked less like a human tongue and more like something belonging to a giant snake. It dropped toward the floor, then curled upward. I stared at it. My brain had no instructions for this situation. There is probably no employee handbook section for what to do when your office crush suddenly becomes a monster. I tried to scream. The tongue moved faster. It wrapped around my body. Cold, slimy, strong. What the foo? I didn't get to finish. The tongue pulled me forward. My feet left the ground. I grabbed at Kiara's shoulders. She didn't move. Her mouth opened even wider. This was impossible. Her head should have split apart. Her neck should have broken. Instead, she simply kept opening. And then she swallowed me. Alive, there is no dignified way to describe being swallowed by the woman you love. One moment, I was standing in the cafeteria thinking I was about to have my first kiss with Kiara. The next, my entire upper body was inside her mouth. Everything was wet, hot, dark. I kicked. I screamed, my hands pushed against something soft. It made no difference. The tongue pulled again. My legs disappeared. For one ridiculous second, I thought about my shoes. I had bought them only 2 weeks earlier. Then darkness covered everything. Pressure squeezed around me. My body moved downward. There were sounds around me, wet sounds, muscles moving. I tried to breathe. Bad idea. I will spare you the details. Let's just say that being swallowed alive is considerably less romantic than it sounds. And then I died. Just like that. Figure, employee, professional overthinker. Secret admirer of Kiara. Dead, you might think death would have been the end of the story. Apparently not. For reasons I still don't understand, my soul floated above the cafeteria. Yes, my soul. I was dead, but I could still see everything. Honestly, after what had just happened, becoming a ghost didn't even make the top 5 strangest things of the day. I looked down. Kiara stood exactly where I had left her. Her mouth had returned to normal. Her face looked perfectly human again. No giant tongue, no impossible jaw, no sign that an adult man had just disappeared inside her. She adjusted her hair. Then she burped, a small one, not even dramatic, like she had finished a fizzy drink. That annoyed me more than it should have. I had just died. At least give me a respectful burp. Kiara looked around. Nobody had noticed. Apparently, office workers can ignore almost anything when deadlines are involved. She calmly walked back toward our desks. I floated after her. What else was I going to do? I had no idea how being dead worked. She returned to her seat. My chair was still next to hers. My laptop was still open. The AdSense report was still on her screen. Kiara looked at it. She clicked something. Then she continued working. Just like that, as if she hadn't swallowed a coworker whole less than 2 minutes earlier. I wanted to shout at everyone, "Hey, monster, right there, the pretty one." Nobody heard me. Naturally, eventually, people noticed I was missing. There was confusion. Calls, messages, someone checked the cafeteria. Security footage apparently wasn't helpful. I'm not surprised. I imagine Kiara had some way of dealing with cameras. Either that, or nobody wanted to explain footage of a man disappearing inside a woman's mouth. The police eventually became involved. My family was contacted. My apartment was searched. My phone records were checked. People at work were questioned. Kiara probably told them I had confessed my feelings and then left. Maybe she even looked sad. She was good at looking sweet. The official case never made sense. There was no body, no clear evidence, no sign of a struggle, no reason for me to disappear. I simply vanished. Eventually, my case was treated as a mysterious disappearance and presumed death. Nobody discovered the truth. Nobody arrested Kiara. She kept her job. For all I know, she got promoted. I watched for a while. Being a ghost is strange. Time doesn't feel normal. Days can pass like minutes. Minutes can feel like hours. I remained near Kiara longer than I probably should have. Partly because I was angry. Partly because I wanted answers. And partly because, even after she had eaten me alive, I still couldn't fully stop thinking she was beautiful. Yes, I understand how stupid that sounds. But love is complicated. Death apparently doesn't make it simpler. I watched her work. She laughed with coworkers. She went to meetings. She drank coffee. She answered emails. Normal person things. Nobody suspected her. Sometimes I wondered whether she had actually meant what she said. Did she really love me? Or had she simply wanted lunch? Maybe both. Maybe that was how her species showed affection. Who knows? Perhaps I had misunderstood the entire relationship. Maybe getting eaten was basically marriage for whatever Kiara was. I should have asked more questions. Then again, if I had asked too many questions, she probably would have eaten me anyway. So here I am, Dead, my big romantic story ended before it really began. For weeks, I had been terrified that Kiara would reject me. I had imagined the worst possible outcomes. She could laugh at me. She could insult me. She could report me. I could lose my job. Turns out my imagination wasn't nearly creative enough. Rejection would have been fine. Rejection would have been wonderful. I would happily have accepted, "Ew, Figa, get away from me." I would have framed those words and hung them on my wall. Instead, I confessed my love. She confessed hers. She asked me for a kiss, and then a giant snake-like tongue dragged me into her mouth. Life is funny like that. Or death, I suppose. My story came to an unfortunate end. The police never solved it. My family never learned what truly happened. My coworkers eventually stopped talking about me. Someone else took my desk. Someone probably deleted my files. The ad campaign continued. Maybe the CTR even improved. Kiara continued living her normal life while hiding whatever she truly was beneath that beautiful face. Sometimes I wonder how many other people she has eaten. Maybe I wasn't the first. I probably wasn't. Perhaps that's why she always seemed so friendly. Maybe every few months she chooses someone quiet, someone lonely, someone who already likes her enough to follow her somewhere private. It would certainly make hunting easier. And I had made myself the perfect victim. I followed her voluntarily. I stood in a private corner with her voluntarily. I even leaned toward her mouth voluntarily. From her point of view, I was probably food delivery. Still, I can't be completely angry. I know I should be. She killed me. That's usually a reasonable reason to dislike someone. But think about it. I spent all that time believing I wasn't good enough for her. I called myself unworthy. I was terrified that she wouldn't even consider me. Technically, I was wrong. She wanted me very badly, just not in the way I had hoped. So yes, my love story ended with me becoming lunch. Not exactly the romantic ending I imagined, but there are worse ways to go. Probably, maybe, okay, being swallowed alive was actually terrible. I don't recommend it. But still, getting eaten by a beautiful woman doesn't sound quite as bad when you leave out the painful details, does it? Story 2. It is with a sorrow greater than I know how to explain that I tell you the story of how I began. Perhaps you already know part of it. Perhaps everyone does. My story has been repeated for longer than any living person can understand. It has been spoken by priests, written into books, whispered by frightened parents, and passed from one generation to the next as a warning. The story of the first murderer. The story of the first blood spilled by one human hand against another. The story of Cain. But stories change when they are told too many times. Names change. Faces change. Truth bends itself to fit what later generations want to believe. And so the person they remember is not the person I was. They say I murdered my own brother. That much is true. They say jealousy drove me to it. That is partly true. They say God rejected my offering and accepted his, and that hatred entered my heart until I led my brother away and killed him. That is simple. Too simple. There was nothing simple about it. How could there be? How could a person destroy the one they loved most in this world and have the reason described in only a handful of words? I loved him. That is the part no one seems to understand. I loved my brother more deeply than I knew how to bear. I loved him even while I hated him. Even while I cursed his name in the privacy of my own thoughts. Even while every kind word spoken about him felt like another stone placed upon my chest. He was everything I was not. Strong where I was weak, loved where I was feared, praised where I was mocked, good where I had already begun to believe myself ruined, and yet he loved me. That was perhaps the cruelest thing of all. We were born after our parents were cast from the garden. The garden. Even now, after all that has happened, I cannot think of it without bitterness. Eden, a place I never saw, a place I was punished for losing. Our parents spoke of it often when we were children. Sometimes father spoke of its rivers, trees, animals, and endless green fields with a softness in his voice that I rarely heard at any other time. Mother remembered other things: the fruit, the serpent, the shame, the voice of God, the moment they understood that they were naked, the fear of being found, the walk away from paradise. The world outside Eden was not gentle. The soil did not willingly give us food. The weather could ruin months of work in a single night. Animals died. Children became sick. Hands cracked from labor. Feet bled. Bodies aged. Everything had to be earned. Everything hurt. Father told us that this was the price of disobedience. Mother rarely answered when he said that. I was their first child. Their first child born outside paradise. Their first proof that life would continue even after Eden had been taken from them. You might imagine they treasured me. Perhaps they did. Once I was small. Smaller than my brother would later become. Even as a child, my hands seemed too delicate for the work expected of us. The land outside Eden did not care whether your fingers were strong enough to hold a tool. It demanded labor anyway. Our parents needed food. They needed crops. They needed shelter. They needed children who could survive. And so I learned to work. I became a gardener. Some would later call me a farmer. I always preferred gardener. It made the work sound less brutal. I planted seeds. I dug trenches. I learned how deep roots needed to sit. I learned which plants survived heat and which needed shade. I learned to smell the air before rain. I learned what insects meant death for a crop and which could be ignored. I learned that the earth could be both mother and enemy. Sometimes I thought I understood soil better than I understood people. Plants were honest. If you failed them, they died. If you cared for them properly, they grew. There was no hidden judgment, no whispering, no laughter when your back was turned. At least, that was what I believed then. My brother came later. Abraham, that was what I called him. Others used different names over time. Some shortened him into something easier. Some would later remember him simply as Abel, the good son, the gentle son, the loved son, the able son. He grew quickly. From the beginning, there was something strong in him, not only in his body, in his spirit. Animals trusted him. Children followed him. Mother smiled when he entered a room. Father stood straighter when he spoke of him. Even strangers seemed warmer around him. He became a keeper of animals. Where I fought with the earth, he walked among living creatures. Sheep followed his voice. Young goats rested beside him. He could calm frightened animals by placing one hand against their neck. I hated him for that sometimes. I loved him for it too. That was how our lives were. Love and hatred wrapped around each other like two vines choking the same tree. He was younger than I was, but soon he became taller. Stronger, broader across the shoulders. I remained slight. People noticed. People always notice weakness. They may pretend not to. but they do. The quiet comments started when I was still young. Why can she not carry what he can? Why does she spend so long with the plants? Why does she work alone? Why is she like this? Sometimes they did not need to say anything. Their eyes were enough. I became the strange one, the difficult child, the one who preferred the garden to company, the one who experimented, the one who asked questions that made Mother uncomfortable, the one Father warned to stop wasting time. He did not always understand what I was doing. None of them did. I had inherited knowledge from my parents, but I wanted more. They had eaten the fruit of knowledge. They had stolen something from the greatest tree ever created. Surely some part of that stolen gift remained in us. Surely it had passed into their blood, into mine. I wanted to understand growth, not merely how to plant food. I wanted to understand why one seed grew stronger than another, why one fruit tasted sweeter, why certain plants survived poison, why some roots seemed to communicate beneath the soil. I crossed plants. I cut branches and joined them to others. I mixed soil. I saved seeds from strange growths. Some plants failed completely. Others changed. There were fruits that grew too quickly and rotted before they could ripen. Flowers with unusual colors. Vines that moved toward warmth rather than sunlight. Roots stained red inside. Once I grew a pale fruit with dark lines beneath the skin that looked almost like veins. Mother threw it into the fire. She called my work unnatural. Father called it foolish. Others used worse words. Cursed, wrong, heretical. I was not trying to insult God. At least, I do not believe I was. I wanted to create something beautiful with the knowledge that had already condemned my family. Was that so terrible? If knowledge was our curse, why should we not use it? If our parents had already paid the price, why should their children remain ignorant? I worked harder. The more they criticized me, the more determined I became. That is the danger of being told you are worthless. Eventually, proving yourself becomes more important than knowing when to stop. My brother tried to defend me. That made everything worse. He would stand beside me when Father became angry. She works harder than anyone, he once said. Father looked at my hands. They were bleeding from a full day in the field. Still, he answered, hard work means little when it is pointed in the wrong direction. I remember Abraham's face. He looked hurt for me. I hated him for that look. I did not want pity from him, especially not from him. The whole community already treated him as something precious. Women watched him. Young men respected him. Children ran to him. People spoke of the strength in his arms and the goodness in his heart. Then they looked at me, the small older sister standing in the dirt, the strange one, the disappointing one, the daughter with sharp thoughts and soft hands. I began to believe there was something wrong in my blood. After all, I was the first child born to the first sinners. Perhaps sin had entered me more strongly. Perhaps I had been spoiled from the beginning. There are thoughts that become dangerous when repeated often enough. I had many of them. Then came the offerings. You have heard this part too. But again, you have heard it incorrectly. We were expected to give something from our work. Not because God needed food, not because heaven hungered. The offering was obedience. Gratitude, proof that we remembered everything came from him. Abraham chose one of the best young animals from his flock, a lamb, healthy, clean, strong. I prepared the best of my garden, or what I believed was the best, not simple grain, not ordinary fruit. I wanted my offering to show everything I had learned, everything I had worked toward. I brought the result of years of failure. A new fruit grown from careful crossings. Its skin was dark red. Inside, the flesh was almost golden. 7 petals formed around the base where it grew from the stem. 7, I thought the number meant something. Completion, perfection. Perhaps I was already looking for signs because I desperately wanted one. I carried it with both hands. My palms were shaking. This was not simply an offering. It was me. Every insult, every lonely hour, every wound on my fingers. Every time Father said I had wasted my strength. Every time Mother looked frightened by what I created. Every smile offered to Abraham instead of me. I placed my work before God. And it was rejected. Do not ask me how I knew. I knew. Just as surely as Abraham knew, his had been accepted. His lamb bled into the earth. My fruit remained beside it. The lamb's blood spread. It reached the fruit. Red against red. Blood and juice mixed together in the soil. I could not look away. The sight stayed with me. It remains with me still. The blood of something innocent. The broken flesh of something I had created. 2 offerings. 1 accepted. 1 worthless. Something inside me broke. It was not only God who had rejected me. That was what my mind told me. It was Father, Mother, the community, the women who smiled at Abraham, the children who followed him, the men who praised his strength. The whole world had judged us both and chosen him. I walked away. I went to my garden, my forbidden little corner of the land where I kept my experiments. I wanted silence. That is important. I wanted to be alone. Perhaps if I had been left alone, none of what came next would have happened. Perhaps I would have screamed. Perhaps I would have destroyed my crops. Perhaps I would have cut my own hands. Perhaps I would have fallen asleep in the dirt and awakened ashamed, but alive. And Abraham would have lived too. Instead, he followed me. Of course he did, because he loved me. Idiot boy. Sweet, foolish boy. He found me among the plants. I had a blade in my hand, not a weapon, a gardening tool, sharp enough to cut thick stems. I was destroying my work, one plant after another. Months of labor, years of thought. I cut them down while crying. Abraham called my name. I told him to leave. He did not. I told him again. He stepped closer. Please, he said. I remember that word more clearly than anything. Please, I told him I hated him. That was a lie, or perhaps half a lie. Those are sometimes worse. I told him everything would be easier if he had never been born. He looked as if I had struck him. I continued anyway. Once cruelty begins, it can become difficult to stop. I accused him of enjoying the praise. I accused him of looking down on me. I accused him of pretending to love me because it made him appear even kinder. He denied it. I shouted louder. He came closer. He reached for my arm. I swung. Once, that was all. One thoughtless movement. One sharp tool. 1 second. The blade opened his throat. For a moment, neither of us understood. He touched the wound, looked at the blood on his fingers, then looked at me. I dropped the tool. He fell. I caught him. That is another part they do not tell. I caught my brother while he died. His blood covered my arms. It soaked into my clothes. It ran over my hands, so much blood. I pressed my fingers against the wound. I begged him to breathe. I begged God to take me instead. I begged the earth to open. Nothing listened. Abraham looked at me. There was pain in his eyes. Fear, too, but not hatred. Why? Why did he not hate me? Why did he make it harder? He tried to speak. Blood entered his mouth. I leaned close. I thought perhaps he would curse me. He had every right. Instead, he asked for mercy. Not for himself. For me. He begged Mother to forgive me. He begged Father not to kill me. He begged God to show me mercy. How dare he? How dare that idiot boy make his final act another act of love? Could he not have hated me for one moment? Could he not have died angry? Could he not have given me something easier to carry? I screamed at him. I told him to stop forgiving me. He smiled, a weak little smile. Then he was gone. My brother died in my arms. The good son, the able son, the one everyone loved. His blood soaked into my garden, into the same soil where my rejected offering still lay. The red fruit had split open. Abraham's blood flowed into its flesh. The fruit seemed to drink it. That sounds impossible. Perhaps it was. But I saw it. The pale inside darkened. The 7 petals around its base opened wider. For a moment, I thought it was alive. I wanted to die. That became my next sin. There had not yet been a murderer. There had not yet been one person who tried to take their own life out of despair either. I suppose I nearly became the first of both. I took the blood-soaked fruit from the ground. My creation. My rejected offering. Poisoned now by the blood of the person I loved most. I thought if anything deserved to kill me, it was that. I bit into it. The taste was unbearable. Sweet at first, then bitter, then metallic. My brother's blood. My own work. My own hatred. Everything mixed together. I ate. I waited. I wanted darkness. Instead, pain came. My body burned. I fell beside Abraham. The sky seemed to split. Every nerve inside me felt filled with fire. I remember screaming until my throat tore. But death did not take me. God would not allow even that mercy. When I woke, Abraham's body was still beside me. The fruit lay crushed near my hand, and my skin had changed. 7 shapes had appeared across me, 7 petal-like marks. Not wounds, not burns, something deeper. They became my mark. 7 petals, 7 sins, 7-fold punishment. A reminder of the seeds I had planted, a reminder of my brother's blood, a reminder that I had tried to escape judgment by dying. I was not allowed. When the others found us, there was no hiding what I had done. Mother's scream was worse than Abraham's death. Father did not speak for a long time. He only stared at me. I wished he would strike me. I wished he would kill me. Instead, there came judgment, banishment, a life away from the people I knew, a life of wandering, and the mark. People later said the mark protected me from anyone who wished to kill me. That is true, but they misunderstand protection. Protection is not always kindness. Sometimes being protected from death is the punishment. I could not die, not properly, not when I wanted. I wandered. Years passed, then decades, then lifetimes. Humanity spread. The story spread with them. But the story changed. Perhaps because people could not accept the truth. Perhaps because later men believed the first murderer had to be a man too. Perhaps the idea of a frightened, bitter older sister did not fit the shape of the monster they needed. So they changed me. Cain became a son. Cain became a brother. Cain became large. Violent, jealous, simple. They forgot Katerina. Catherine, the girl with soil beneath her nails. The daughter who grew strange plants. The older sister who loved her brother so much that his goodness became unbearable to her. They remembered the murderer and erased the person. Perhaps I deserved that. My name became something mothers warned children about. Men called each other Cain when they wished to accuse them of betrayal. Artists painted me with a beard. Priests preached about the hatred between brothers. I sometimes stood among crowds and listened. No one knew. No one looked at the little woman among them and thought she might be the creature from their oldest story. Why would they? What fool would believe such savagery belonged to someone so small? A sister, a gardener, a daughter, the firstborn child. I have been called cursed, monster, murderer, heretic. I have earned all of those names. But there was one person who never called me any of them. Abraham, my brother. The only one who loved me at the very end. The one who forgave me while his blood ran through my fingers. I hate him for that sometimes, even now. Forgiveness can be cruel when you believe you deserve hatred. It gives you no enemy to blame, no anger to hide inside, only yourself. I have lived with myself for longer than any human should. I have watched kingdoms rise. I have watched them disappear. I have watched people repeat my sin in ways greater than I could ever have imagined. Brothers killed brothers. Sisters killed sisters. Children killed parents. Kings killed thousands. Nations destroyed nations. And still they remembered me as the beginning, the first. Cain, the gardener of sin. Cain, the firstborn. Cain, the murderer. But names are strange things. They become harder than truth. Cain was never the name of a son. Not originally. Not to me. It was only what remained after generations broke my story apart and rebuilt it in their own image. Katerina, Catherine, Cain the name, does not matter anymore. The mark remains. 7 petals across my skin. 7 reminders. I have tried cutting them away. They return. I have burned them. They return. I have drowned. I have starved. I have fallen from cliffs. I have swallowed poisons greater than anything I grew in that first garden. Still I wake. Always I wake. God has given me the most terrible mercy. Life, again and again and again. I once believed I would be the first human to successfully choose death for herself. Instead, I became proof that such freedom could be denied. I do not know how much longer this punishment will continue. Perhaps until the final child of Adam and Eve is gone. Perhaps until no one remains who remembers the word murder. Perhaps until the earth itself dies. Sometimes I think even then I will remain. A little woman walking across an empty world. Soil under her nails. 7 petals on her skin. Remembering one moment forever. Abraham falling. My hands catching him. His blood entering the earth. His lips moving with the last strength he had. Forgive her. Those words have followed me farther than any curse. I wish he had damned me. I wish he had hated me. I wish his final sight had been my face, and his final feeling had been anger. Instead, he loved me. Even then, that is why I know I can never escape him. And perhaps that is the true mark of Cain. Not the petals, not the endless life, not the protection from death. It is knowing the person you destroyed was better than you in the final moment. Knowing he used his last breath to save the soul of the person who took his life. Knowing that, all these years later, after the world has twisted our story beyond recognition, I am still loved by the only person whose hatred might have made my punishment easier. Abraham, the Abel's son, my beautiful little brother. And I am Cain, Katerina, Catherine, the firstborn daughter of the first sinners, the gardener, the outcast, the first murderer. The small sister history turned into a man because perhaps mankind found that easier to believe. And if God still watches me, if she still sees this ruined experiment wandering beneath the same stars that once shone over Eden, then perhaps she already knows the truth I have spent ages trying to deny. I did not kill Abraham because I did not love him. I killed him because I loved him, hated myself, and could no longer tell where one feeling ended and the other began. That was my first true harvest. Not fruit, not grain, not flowers, blood, his blood. And it watered my garden better than anything ever had. Nothing I grew afterward was ever as terrible. Nothing ever needed to be. For the seed planted that day has followed humanity ever since. Brother against brother, family against family, love turning sour until it becomes violence. And every time blood touches the earth, I wonder if somewhere beneath the soil, the roots still remember me. Cain, the gardener of sin. Cain, the firstborn. Cain, the daughter. Cain, the sister. Cain, who was never allowed to die. Story 3. I don't want to write this. I really don't. Putting it into words makes everything feel more real, and there are parts of my life I have spent years trying not to think about. Memories are easier to live with when they stay buried somewhere deep inside your mind. Once you write them down, they become something solid, something another person can read, something that exists outside of you. But maybe that is what I need. Maybe writing this is the only way to make it stop. Or maybe I just need someone else to know. I want our story to exist somewhere besides my head. I want someone to read this and understand who she was, at least the way I knew her. I want someone to know who I am, who I used to be, and what I am slowly becoming. My memories are not perfect. I know that. They are colored by childhood, fear, love, anger, and all the things I learned later. Some of them feel dreamy and soft around the edges. Others are so clear that I can still smell the room or hear the exact tone of someone's voice. I am going to write them in the order they come back to me. Sometimes I may have to return to an earlier memory because another detail suddenly makes sense. Sometimes I may spend too long describing things that seem unimportant. Those small things matter to me. They are what made me. Maybe dressing everything up in pretty words is another way of protecting myself. Maybe if I describe my pain beautifully enough, it will feel like somebody else's story. Maybe some stranger will read this and find my suffering interesting. I suppose that is better than being forgotten. I was 12 years old when my mother tried to kill me. She held me down and tried to cut my eyes out of my skull. I sometimes tell myself she did not really want to kill me. Technically, she may not have. But when you are 12 years old and your mother has you pinned beneath her while holding something sharp near your face, the difference does not seem very important. In a strange way, I think she succeeded. She did not kill my body, obviously, but something inside me died that day. I think it was one of the good parts. For years, I tried to create kinder explanations for what happened. I told myself maybe she had been trying to save me. Maybe she believed I was no longer really her daughter. Maybe when she looked at me, she saw something pretending to be me. The awful thing is that she was not completely wrong. I was changing. Something was happening to me. Knowing that now does not make what she did easier to understand. If anything, it makes the whole memory worse. The strangest part is that I still love her. I hate admitting that. I do not know how love survives something like that, but it does. Love is not always logical. Sometimes it continues long after it should have died. I can think about her hands holding me down, about her face while I screamed, and still remember being little and falling asleep against her shoulder. Both memories belong to the same woman. Both things are true. As an adult, I can look back and recognize signs I could not understand as a child. I see them because I have begun noticing some of the same things in myself. That scares me more than almost anything. One of the memories that returns most often begins on an ordinary weekday morning. Mornings in our house were always chaotic. My mother moved from room to room trying to get everyone dressed, fed, cleaned, and ready. My younger brother was never ready when he was supposed to be. My father always seemed to be searching for something he had just put down. Someone needed shoes. Someone needed lunch. Someone had forgotten homework. Then, almost all at once, the storm would pass. My father would take my younger brother to preschool before heading to work, leaving me and my mother behind. I was old enough to prepare myself for school by then. After breakfast, I usually had a little time before I needed to walk to the bus stop. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table, reading a library book. I remember the cereal bowl in front of me. It was one of those cheap store brand cereals my parents bought because each of us wanted something different. And buying expensive name brands for every child would have been ridiculous. I remember the sunlight through the kitchen window. I remember knowing I had maybe 10 or 15 minutes before I needed to leave. I wanted to finish one more chapter. Reading on the school bus was impossible for me. It still is, actually. If I focus on a book, phone, drawing, or anything close to my face while riding in a moving vehicle, I get sick almost immediately. The vibration from the road, the constant changes in speed, the swaying through turns, all of it seems to confuse something in my brain. Even when I try to ignore it, the movement stays in the background. First comes the pressure in my head. Then, the warmth. Then, nausea. So on the bus, I usually just stared out the window. That meant my quiet time before school was precious. I had my nose buried in my book when my mother called my name. Catherine? Her voice slipped into the story right as I turned a page. I was reading about a boy and his sister who traveled to strange places from a magical treehouse. At that age, books were not just entertainment to me. They were places I could disappear into. Yeah? I kept my eyes on the page at first. I assumed she wanted me to take out the trash. The kitchen trash probably needed to go anyway. Leftovers from Sunday dinner had already been sitting in it long enough that every time someone opened the cabinet, a faint smell escaped. Instead, my mother said, "Could you look at me for a moment?" My whole body tightened. There was something about the way she said it. Every child recognizes that voice. It is the voice adults use when something important is about to happen. Either you are in trouble, someone else is in trouble, or you are about to hear something they believe you are finally old enough to understand. I slipped my damaged bookmark between the pages. Then I looked up. My mother was leaning against the kitchen counter. She was pretty. I think handsome may actually be the better word, though people usually use that for men. She had dirty blonde hair that fell in soft waves around her face. She was thin, though having 2 children had left a little softness around her stomach. Her face usually looked gentle. Usually there was also something sharp beneath that softness. A certain look in her eyes could end a joke instantly. My father could make some stupid comment during church, and one glance from her would silence him. Her eyes were light brown, almost amber in the right light. They matched her hair and mine. I did not look directly into them very often. Eye contact has always been difficult for me. Calling it uncomfortable does not really explain it. When someone expects me to look directly into their eyes, something inside my nervous system seems to panic. My thoughts begin falling apart. My spine fills with tiny waves of electricity. My stomach tightens. My skin starts feeling too small for my body. There's this horrible need to move, like I could somehow crawl away from the feeling if I shifted enough. But if I move too much, people tell me to sit still. Then it gets worse. If the eye contact continues for too long, I can start crying. Sometimes I want to scream. It sounds dramatic when I describe it now, but as a child, I had no way to explain the feeling. I only knew that something other people did naturally caused me real pain. One of my earliest memories of it involves my father. I had skipped Sunday school. I do not remember exactly why. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I hated sitting still. Maybe I had hidden somewhere because I could not stand another morning surrounded by people. Whatever the reason, my father found out. He was not cruel about it. I want to make that clear. He simply wanted to make sure I understood that I could not keep skipping. He put his hand beneath my chin and gently but firmly raised my face. "Look at me." I did. He held my chin there so he could see my eyes while he explained what would happen if I did it again. It probably lasted only a few seconds. To me, it felt endless. I remember feeling as if his gaze was burning through me. My body wanted to twist away. My brain was screaming at me to escape. I could feel tears coming, but I did not understand why. I never skipped Sunday school again. Not because I was afraid of the punishment he described. I was afraid he would make me look at him again. I do not blame him. He could not have known. To him, eye contact meant attention and respect. To me, it felt like being opened up. At 5 years old, I came up with the only explanation that made sense to me. There was something evil inside me. Children are strange that way. People like to say kids are stupid. They are not. Children are intelligent, curious, and constantly trying to understand the world. The problem is that they do not have enough information, so they take what they know and build explanations from it. Sometimes those explanations are completely wrong. I knew from church that demons existed. At least I believed they did. I knew demons were evil. I knew evil things did not like God. I knew I felt strange during church. I knew looking into people's eyes made something inside me scream. Therefore, in my 5-year-old mind, there was a perfectly reasonable answer. There must be a demon inside me. What else was I supposed to think? I actually tried telling my mother something was wrong, more than once. The first time is still one of my clearest childhood memories. We were in church. Pastor Thomas was preaching. I do not remember the subject of the sermon anymore. At that age, I understood only pieces of what adults said during services. There were stories, names, important words spoken with serious voices. God, sin, heaven, hell, angels, the devil. Sometimes I could follow the message. Other times, it all became a stream of noise. That morning was especially bad. I had already been forced into my Sunday clothes. My dress was bright and covered in flowers. It looked nice. It felt terrible. The straps scratched my shoulders. The fabric moved every time I breathed. My mother had pulled my hair back tightly because she hated when I chewed on it. I did that often. I would pull a strand of hair across my lips or between my fingers because the soft texture calmed me. But my hair had been tied away from my face. No hair, no toy, nothing to do with my hands. The church pew had a hard wooden back and a red cushion underneath me that somehow managed to be both too soft and uncomfortable. There was also the smell, my apple shampoo, my mother's perfume, wood polish, old books, people. The scents mixed together until they became too sweet. Every person around me created another layer of noise. Someone coughing, someone moving their shoes, a child whispering, clothing brushing against clothing, pages turning. The little movement seemed louder and louder. Pastor Thomas continued speaking from the front of the room, but the sounds around me began swallowing his voice. I tried sitting still. That was what I was supposed to do. The harder I tried, the worse everything became. My dress scratched. The lights seemed too bright. Someone behind me breathed through their nose. A woman nearby kept moving her foot. Every sound arrived inside my skull at the same volume. I began feeling angry. Not ordinary anger. It felt enormous, violent, like something trapped inside my chest wanted to claw its way out. I hated the feeling. It frightened me. That was the demon. At least, that is what I thought. The demon inside my head was screaming. I imagined it furious because we were in church. Maybe God was hurting it. Maybe the sermon was making it angry. Then I started feeling its anger too. Heat moved through my chest and shoulders. My thoughts became crowded. My hands wanted to hit something. I did not want to hurt anyone. I just wanted everything to stop. I needed help. My mother was sitting beside me. I reached over and gently pulled on her sleeve. She looked down. Mothers have a particular way of responding to children in public. They already expect whatever you are about to ask. Can I go to the bathroom? Can I have a snack? When are we leaving? My mother leaned closer. I raised my hand around her ear because I knew we were supposed to be quiet. Then I whispered something I had probably been thinking about for months. Mommy, I think something in me is demonic. I pulled back. I watched her face carefully. I expected an answer, a solution. Maybe she knew a prayer. Maybe she would tell Pastor Thomas. Maybe adults had dealt with this before. My mother sat upright. For a few seconds, she looked straight ahead. Maybe she was staring at Pastor Thomas. Maybe the cross behind him. I sometimes wonder what went through her mind. Did she think she had failed somehow? Did she blame herself? Was she frightened? Did she think I had heard something disturbing from another child? Whatever she thought, she eventually looked down at me again. When she leaned closer, I turned my ear toward her. What do you mean? She whispered. What's wrong? I remember feeling disappointed. She did not understand. That meant I had to explain it properly. If I could find the correct words, I believed, she could give me the correct answer. I don't know, I whispered. I feel angry and I don't like it. I don't feel good. There was a pause. I now think she was trying to understand what I meant. Maybe she thought I was tired. Maybe she thought I was bored. Maybe she assumed I was having a childish mood. Her answer was simple. You'll be okay. Go take a walk. That was not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to cry. I could feel tears beginning to form. But I already believed there was something bad inside me. I did not want to prove it by causing a scene in church. So I nodded. Then I stood. Walking out of the worship hall felt like crossing an impossible distance. People did not actually stare at me that much. I know that now. But at the time, I felt every pair of eyes. I imagined everyone knowing something was wrong with me. My body became heavier with each step. The strange numbness inside my head spread. It felt like television static. That old gray and white snow that used to fill the screen when there was no signal. My thoughts were still there somewhere, but reaching them became harder. I passed through the heavy wooden doors at the back of the church. The moment they closed behind me, Pastor Thomas's voice became muffled. I stood in the common area. To my right was the exit. Nearby were stairs leading to the basement. The pastor's office was somewhere close. I did not know where I was supposed to take a walk, so I simply continued forward. I entered the dining hall. It was empty. The lights were off, but sunlight came through the large windows. Long white folding tables had already been arranged for coffee and pastries after the service. The room felt enormous without people inside it. Quiet, truly quiet. I closed the doors behind me. Then something happened. My mind came back. The screaming stopped. The heat in my chest disappeared. The static faded. It felt as though my soul had suddenly snapped back into my body. I stood there for several seconds, almost confused by the relief. Nothing had been removed from me. No prayer had been spoken. No demon had been cast out. There was simply nobody around. No noise, no scratchy clothes moving beside me, no eyes, no whispers, no sermon, just sunlight and empty tables. I walked between the rows slowly. I ran my fingertips along the plastic surfaces. There was something comforting about the repetition. Table, gap, chair, chair, chair. My thoughts could move again. I could think about one thing at a time. The angry creature inside me became quiet. It was still there somewhere, but now it seemed small, almost tired. I started wondering whether my mother had been right. Maybe walking really had helped. Of course, I did not understand why. I was tempted to steal one of the pastries arranged along the far wall. I did not. Instead, I wandered into the kitchen. Children were not usually allowed in there alone. That made it interesting. I opened cabinets and looked inside. Industrial-sized containers. Unfamiliar kitchen tools. Huge pots. Stacks of plates. Everything seemed different from our kitchen at home. I did not touch anything. I just looked. I remember being completely happy. That memory stayed with me because I think it was one of the first times I had ever been truly alone. Not alone in my bedroom while people moved elsewhere in the house. Not alone while waiting for someone. Actually alone. Nobody wanted anything from me. Nobody was watching me. Nobody was expecting me to sit correctly or answer properly. Nobody needed me to look at them. For those few minutes, I was free. I would not have used that word then, but I can now. Freedom, eventually I returned to the service. I do not remember the rest of that morning. That part disappeared into the ordinary blur of childhood, but I remember the quiet. Years later, sitting at our kitchen table with my library book open in front of me, I still did not understand why that memory mattered. I only knew that being watched made something inside me uncomfortable, especially when the person watching was my mother. Yeah, Mom? I forced myself to meet her eyes. Immediately, those familiar little waves of panic began moving through me. Tiny bursts of electricity under my skin. My stomach tightened. My shoulders stiffened. I wanted to look at her nose instead, or her mouth, or the wall behind her. But she had specifically asked me to look. So I did. Something about her expression was wrong. I could not identify what. Reading faces had never been easy for me. I could recognize obvious happiness, obvious sadness, obvious anger. Anything more complicated became guesswork. People seemed to communicate through tiny movements I could not see. A raised eyebrow, a change in the mouth, the way someone held their shoulders. Everyone else appeared to understand that hidden language naturally. I did not. And because this was my mother, I trusted her. That was the worst part. No matter how strange she looked that morning, no matter how unusual her voice sounded, she was still the woman who had raised me. The woman who had brushed my hair. The woman who had held my hand crossing streets. The woman I once believed could save me from the demon living inside my mind. I could not imagine needing protection from her. So I kept looking. Her amber eyes stayed fixed on mine. 1 second, 2, 3, the discomfort grew. My fingers tightened around the edge of the book. Mom? She did not answer immediately. Her face was pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. I realized then that she had probably not slept. Her hair, usually carefully brushed in the morning, looked tangled near the back. One of her hands gripped the kitchen counter so hard that her knuckles had gone white. I should have noticed those things sooner. Maybe another child would have. Maybe not. At 12, you assume your parents understand what is happening, even when they clearly do not. Catherine, she finally said. Her voice was very quiet. Your eyes. My stomach dropped. What about them? She did not answer. She simply stared. I wanted to turn away. The electric pain of eye contact had become unbearable, but something in her expression held me there. Fear, I understand that now. My mother was afraid of me. At the time, I only knew something was terribly wrong. What? I asked again. Her lips parted. For a moment, she looked as though she might cry. Then, she whispered something so softly, I almost did not hear it. They're doing it again. I had no idea what she meant. I wish I still didn't. Story 4. After living with it for so many years, I think I finally understand what it is. Fear, that is why I struggle to look people in the eyes. For a long time, I thought it was just awkwardness, maybe shyness. Maybe I simply did not like people looking at me too closely. But as I got older, I started to understand that there was something deeper underneath it. Some part of me has always been afraid that if someone looks into my eyes for too long, they will see what is inside me. They will notice that something is missing. They will realize that sometimes I am only laughing because everyone else is laughing. Sometimes I understand that something is funny. I can feel that small movement in my chest, the tiny flutter that comes before a smile. I can feel the corners of my mouth wanting to move. But the laugh itself? Sometimes that part is fake. I know what my laugh sounds like. I have heard myself do it enough times. If I move my chest the right way, push the air out correctly, and make the right expression, I can repeat it. It is not very difficult. Most people never notice. At least, I hope they don't. That fear started when I was young. There were moments when I could tell my reactions were not matching everyone else's, and when you are a child, you do not always have the words to explain what is wrong. You only know that everyone else seems to understand something naturally, while you are standing there trying to learn the rules. I remember one morning with my mother very clearly. She had been looking at me for too long. Mom? I only began to feel uncomfortable because she did not answer. Normally, silence did not bother me much, but this was different. She was just staring at me. I started worrying that she was sick. I never liked it when my mother did not feel well. Are you okay? She blinked and shook her head slightly, as if she had been somewhere else for a moment. Then she turned away from me and started washing the breakfast dishes. Yay, yes, sorry, sweetie, it's just... Her voice became quieter. You're getting all grown up. You're going to be in high school before I know it. I don't know what I'm going to do. The kitchen faucet was running, making it difficult to hear her. Plates knocked together beneath the growing white soap bubbles. I remember sitting there and feeling confused. I knew she was emotional. I knew I was supposed to say something comforting. The problem was that I did not immediately know what. I sat there silently, trying different sentences in my head. I wanted to give her the right answer. That was something I did often. Other people seemed to speak naturally when emotions were involved. I had to build my responses piece by piece. Maybe that was one of the reasons I feared eye contact. I was always worried people would see me thinking. They would see the delay. They would notice that I was searching for the right reaction instead of simply having it. It'll be okay, Mom, I finally said. I still need you. Chris and I both do. We love you. High school isn't going to change that. I had no idea if those were the words she needed. They were just the best ones I could find. And because words did not feel like enough, I put my book down and walked over to her. I wrapped both arms around her waist. At first, she did not move. Then I heard something fall into the sink beneath the water. She leaned against the counter slightly. Her shoulders shook. She dried her hands and turned around, finally hugging me back. I held on tightly. I love you, Mom. I repeated it because I thought maybe saying it twice would make it stronger. When words failed me, I often tried to make up for it with physical affection. I squeezed her a little tighter. I know, sweetie, she whispered. I love you too. I'm sorry. I breathed in the familiar smell of her. It is difficult to explain the smell of someone you have known your entire life. There was the faint scent of flowers from whatever soap or lotion she used. Sweat beneath fabric. Laundry detergent. The warm smell of skin. But underneath all of that was something else. Something that simply smelled like Mom. Family has its own scent. Home has one too. I knew I loved my mother. That part was never confusing. But death was different. Death made everything complicated. I think someone would have eventually noticed something strange about me if they had watched closely enough during my grandfather's funeral. Everyone was crying. My mother was crying. Other family members were crying. People I barely knew were crying. I wasn't. I knew I loved my grandfather. That was not the problem. I missed him. I missed his hugs. I missed the way he smiled. There was a heaviness in my chest that I thought might be sadness. But I did not feel any tears coming. That scared me. There is a very slow kind of heartbreak that happens when you are a child and start believing that something is wrong with you. You notice one little difference, then another. Eventually, those differences begin connecting together. And when you do not understand them, you start giving them terrible names. Cold, bad, heartless, monster I knew I could cry. That made the whole thing worse. I had cried many times before. I cried when I got hurt. I cried when I got into serious trouble. I cried once when I found a dead cat near the end of our street. That memory has stayed with me much more clearly than I wish it had. The cat had been hit by a car. Its back legs were stretched out behind it, as though it had almost managed to reach the grass before dying. Only a few more feet, and maybe it would have been somewhere soft. Instead, part of its body had been crushed against the road. The things that were supposed to stay safely inside of it had been spread across the pavement. Some had dried. Some still looked wet. There were ugly colors beneath the beautiful tortoiseshell fur. Pink, black, dark red. I remember staring at the cat's head. That part still looked normal. Its ears were soft-looking. Its face still had shape. And suddenly I imagined reaching down and gently touching the fur between its ears. The thought that there was nothing inside anymore to feel that touch hit me all at once. The tears came immediately. I cried hard. I cried for a cat I did not know. It did not even have a collar. I had no idea whose cat it was. Maybe it belonged to someone. Maybe someone was already walking around the neighborhood calling its name. Maybe nobody owned it. It did not matter. Seeing it there broke something in me. So why could I cry for a dead animal, but not my own grandfather? That question haunted me. At my grandfather's funeral, I stood near his open casket and felt almost nothing. Not nothing exactly, but nothing strong enough to make sense. Everyone around me seemed to see Grandpa. I saw a body. His face looked wrong, too still, too carefully prepared. There was makeup on his skin that he would never have worn while alive. His expression was not the warm, wrinkled smile I remembered. He was dressed nicely and resting inside a soft, decorated box. People leaned over him and cried. To me, it did not look like him anymore. It looked like an object shaped like him. A prop. A doll created to resemble a person who was no longer there. My real grandfather was memory. My real grandfather was sitting in his recliner across from my grandmother while they watched television. My real grandfather was old Western shows playing in the background. Bonanza, lazy meals, the smell of their house, the house my mother had grown up in. My real grandfather was teaching an impatient little child how to fish. He was stories about years so far in the past that they seemed impossible to me. He was strong hugs. He was warmth. The body in the casket had none of those things. That was the part I could not understand. Everyone seemed to be crying because they were looking at him, but I could not see him there. He was gone. The thing in the box was only what he had left behind. I knew I would never see him alive again. I understood the fact completely, but the fact itself did not bring tears. He was gone. I was still there. Crying could not change either thing. So what was crying supposed to do? I did not understand. Even now, I sometimes wonder if that makes me cruel. Is it terrible that I compared my grandfather's body to the dead cat? Maybe if I had seen him the way I saw that animal, it would have felt more real. Maybe if the inside of his body had been spread across a road, horrible and impossible to ignore, I would have understood death in the same sudden way. Maybe I would have cried until I could not breathe. That thought became another item on the invisible list I carried in my head. The list of crimes nobody else knew I had committed. Thought crimes. Things I had never done. Things I had only imagined. Questions I believed good people were not supposed to ask. Every strange thought became evidence against me. When I was very young, I sometimes imagined there was a demon in my mind. It sounds dramatic now. At the time, it made sense. There was me, the person trying to act correctly. Then there was something else. The part asking terrible questions. The part that felt the wrong things, or did not feel enough. I eventually stopped fighting that demon. I almost started thinking of it like a friend. Much later, I understood there had never been a demon. It was only me. That realization was both comforting and horrifying. At the funeral, one thing I did like was my black dress. That probably sounds like another terrible thing to remember, but it is true. I liked the dress. At normal church services, I was usually made to wear lighter colors. Clothes that felt too cheerful and exposed. The funeral dress had long sleeves. I could pull them down over my hands. I liked hiding inside them. Once I was sure my mother was no longer crying so hard, and my father was near enough to comfort her, I slipped away. I grabbed a cookie from the snack table first. It was too dry. I took a bite and immediately regretted it. Then, I wandered through the building. The funeral was being held in a church or church-like place with several hallways and rooms that were not being used that day. I enjoyed those areas much more than the room full of grieving people. The farther I walked, the quieter everything became. I liked empty places. I still do. Places built for people, but temporarily without them, always felt special to me. Classrooms after everyone had gone home, church hallways during a service, waiting rooms after hours, empty meeting rooms. They held evidence that people existed without forcing me to deal with the people themselves. I could study what they left behind. Books, pens, decorations, pictures, furniture, small objects that seemed important to someone. I was often tempted to take things. I never did. If I picked something up, I tried to return it exactly where I had found it. I would study it, turn it over, wonder who owned it, wonder why they chose it, then put it back. The silence was comforting. My imagination became company. I had endless questions in my head. Sometimes those questions felt more real to me than family friends who claimed to remember me from before I could remember them. Eventually, I knew I had been gone too long. I did not want to get in trouble. So I reluctantly returned to the crowded part of the building. I found my parents talking with adults. They were having one of those conversations that seemed important to grown-ups and completely meaningless to children. Someone introduced themselves to me. Again, apparently this person had held me when I was a baby. Adults loved telling children that. I held you when you were this big. I never knew what response they expected. Congratulations? Thank you? Sorry I don't remember? I stayed quiet. I hid partly behind my father's leg. I did not want to talk. What confused me most was how normal everyone seemed. Hadn't these people been crying a few minutes ago? Now they were having conversations. Some were even laughing softly. How could sadness turn off like that? Was it fake? Was the laughter fake? Were they doing the same thing I did sometimes? Did everyone imitate emotion? No one explained any of it to me. Eventually, after what felt like hours, people started leaving. I was relieved. I assumed we were finally going home. I hurried to the car before everyone else. My father helped buckle me into my booster seat. I noticed all the other cars were lining up along the road. Something about that confused me. Dad, are we going home now? I was careful not to say I was bored. Saying I'm bored at a funeral felt like the kind of thing that could get me hit in the mouth. No, my father said. He sounded tired. "We're going to bury Grandpa." Oh, my excitement disappeared. Okay, I had thought the funeral was finished. Apparently, there was another part. By then, I was frustrated. I wanted to leave. It was getting colder outside. I knew we were going to another place where everyone would stand around the same box with the same body inside. The flesh doll. That was how my mind thought of it. The words made me feel guilty even then. I did not want to be a worse daughter than I already believed I was, so I stayed quiet. The cars drove in a long line toward the cemetery. We passed through tall black iron gates. Then the road twisted between sections of green grass and stone markers. When we finally stopped, everyone got out. The casket was taken toward the grave. But I barely watched. I was looking at the cemetery. It was beautiful. That surprised me. There were wide fields of grass covered in gray stones. Some markers stood tall. Others were almost flat against the ground. Large trees watched over everything. Their bark was dark. Their branches stretched far above us. Autumn had already started touching the leaves. Some were brown around the edges. Others were yellowing. The wind was cool enough to make my skin tighten. There was something peaceful about the place. I wanted that peace. Everyone gathered around the grave. A priest began speaking. I stood with them for a little while. Then I walked away. No one stopped me. Maybe nobody noticed. Maybe they did and decided it was not worth interrupting the priest. Either way, I was grateful. With every step I took away from the funeral, I felt lighter. The voices faded. Soon, all I could hear was wind moving through leaves. The cemetery seemed enormous. Rows and rows of stones stretched in every direction. I walked among them slowly. I read names, birth dates, death dates, short messages carved into stone. Beloved mother, beloved father, loving wife, loving husband. Some graves had flowers, others did not. Some looked recently visited. Others had dead leaves gathered around them. I remember feeling sorry for those people. I hoped someone still came to see them. I hoped they had mattered to somebody. And strangely, I also felt guilty for being the person standing there. They deserved better visitors, I thought. They deserved people who cried, people who remembered them properly. Not something like me. Not a creature walking around studying names because it found the silence comforting. That was how I saw myself at that age. Not quite human, close enough to imitate one, but wrong underneath. I wandered until I knew I had probably pushed my luck. Then I returned. Years later, my grandmother died. The experience was disturbingly similar. That is one of the things that hurts me most now. The two funerals have almost blended together in my memory. Time does that. It takes moments that once felt separate and drops them into the same fog. I remember parts clearly. Other parts are gone. Sometimes I am not sure which funeral a specific memory belongs to. That frightens me. These people were important. They should have their own space in my mind. Instead, years have worn the edges away. My grandmother's funeral felt like the same play performed a second time. The same room, the same voices, the same strange conversations, the same crying followed by normal speech. Another person I loved placed inside another decorated box. But there is one thing I remember clearly from Grandma's funeral. I touched her face. I do not remember doing that with Grandpa. With Grandma, I reached out and placed my fingers against her cheek. Her skin was cool, room temperature, not freezing, not warm, soft with age, but wrong. That is the only word I have. Wrong, the skin still belonged to her body, but it did not feel like her anymore. There was no warmth beneath it, no tiny movement, no reaction. Nothing. That memory is strange because I have another memory of touching the same face years earlier. That one is much clearer. I was small enough to sit in her lap. I remember reaching up and touching her cheek while she held me. I looked into her eyes. Normally, I hated eye contact. Even as a child, looking into someone's eyes for too long made me uncomfortable. But with her, in that moment, I did not look away. I saw love. That was all. No judgment, no confusion, no fear, no sense that she was trying to look inside me and discover what was wrong. Just love. I wish I had more memories like that. I wish I could remember entire days, whole conversations, her voice saying ordinary things, the sound of her walking through the house. But memory is cruel. It keeps random details and destroys the things you beg it to save. Moments are strange things. A moment can last seconds and still shape an entire life. One look can make someone feel human. One sentence can destroy them. One hug can stay in the body for decades after the arms that gave it are gone. A moment can repair something broken. A different moment can damage it so badly that no one ever puts it back together correctly. When I look at my past now, I do not see a smooth story. I see moments. My mother staring at me over breakfast, water running into a sink, my arms around her waist, a dead cat on the road, my grandfather's painted face, my long black sleeves pulled over my hands, an empty church hallway, cold cemetery air, names carved into stone, my grandmother's cheek beneath my fingers, her eyes years earlier, filled with nothing but love. These are the pieces that remain. These are the moments that built me. Sometimes they healed me. Sometimes they convinced me I was a monster. And sometimes I still cannot tell the difference. Maybe that is why what happened later affected me the way it did. By then, I had already spent years studying emotion like a language everyone else learned naturally. I knew how to smile when a smile was expected. I knew when to laugh. I knew when to lower my voice. I knew when to hug someone. I knew the expressions people wanted. But knowing the correct response and feeling it were not always the same thing. That difference became my secret. I guarded it carefully. I became good at avoiding long eye contact. If somebody looked at me for too long, I would glance down. Look at their nose, their mouth, something behind them, anything except their eyes. Because eyes felt dangerous. If they stared long enough, maybe they would know. Maybe they would see all the thoughts I was ashamed of. Maybe they would see that I had once stood over my grandfather's body and wondered why a dead cat had made me cry harder. Maybe they would see how much effort went into appearing normal. Maybe they would see the thing I had once called a demon. The thing I eventually understood was only myself. I wish I could say adulthood fixed that. It didn't. You get better at hiding. That is not the same thing as getting better. People think children grow out of strange fears. Sometimes the fears simply grow up with them. They become quieter, more complicated, easier to explain away. Eventually, I stopped thinking I was evil simply because my emotions worked differently. Mostly. There are still bad days. There are still moments when someone tells me terrible news and I become more concerned with my own reaction than the news itself. Am I making the right face? Should I say something? Should I touch their shoulder? Am I supposed to cry? Can they tell I'm thinking about this? That is the prison of self-awareness. You can become so focused on proving that you care that you stop being able to feel anything naturally. And then there are the memories I do not like talking about. The biggest one is my parents. I loved them. I need to say that clearly. Whatever else is wrong with me, I loved my parents. I know I did. I remember my mother's smell. I remember hiding near my father's leg because I did not want to talk to strangers. I remember being held, being corrected, being comforted, being embarrassed. I remember ordinary family things that only become precious when enough time has passed. But when the final moment came, when grief was supposed to demand the same ritual from me again, I could not do it. Maybe I was tired of funerals. Maybe I was afraid. Maybe I already knew exactly what I would see. Another box, another body, another room full of people watching me while I tried to perform the right emotions. Maybe I was afraid that this time, with the two people who should have mattered most, my failure to react correctly would finally expose me. Maybe someone would look into my eyes and know. I do not have one clean answer. Life rarely gives those. I only know what I did. I did not go to my parents' funeral. Story 5. My mind is constantly fed fantasies until they no longer feel like dreams. They feel like promises. They feel like things I was supposed to have, things I somehow lost before I was even born. Everywhere I look, there are images of lives I cannot reach. Beautiful places, perfect bodies, clean homes, quiet mornings, people who seem to wake up knowing who they are and why they are here. I see them in movies, advertisements, photographs, games, stories, and the endless stream of images that passes across my screen every day. The world keeps showing me things that exist somewhere, yet never seem to exist where I can touch them. That is the cruelest part. If those things were impossible, perhaps I could accept not having them. If they were pure fantasy, then I could laugh at myself for wanting them. But they are real. Somewhere, someone wakes up in a place surrounded by green fields instead of gray walls. Somewhere, someone looks into a mirror and recognizes the body staring back. Somewhere, someone eats without thinking about where the food came from. Somewhere, someone loves without wondering whether love is simply another chain. I know these things exist, I just cannot reach them. And because I know they exist, my mind keeps returning to them, again and again. It is like being locked in a room with a window overlooking paradise. You can see everything. You simply cannot open the glass. Maybe that is why I spend so much time thinking about the animals. People probably think that is strange. They would tell me I am comparing things that should not be compared. Maybe they are right. But sometimes I look at the way animals are raised for food, and I cannot stop seeing something familiar. They are born inside systems they did not choose. They live in cages they did not build. They are fed because someone else needs them to stay alive. They grow because someone else wants something from their bodies. They are moved when they are told to move. They are kept where someone else decides they should remain. They breed. They eat. They sleep. Then they die. Their entire existence belongs to someone who never asked what they wanted. Maybe the saddest thing is that many of them never know anything different. A pig raised inside concrete walls does not understand that there are forests. A chicken kept beneath artificial lights may never know what sunlight feels like across open ground. An animal standing inside a metal pen may never understand that somewhere beyond those fences there are fields without walls. Perhaps ignorance is mercy. That thought frightens me more than almost anything else. Would their lives be worse if they knew? If somehow you could show them what existed beyond the fences, would that knowledge make them happy? Or would it destroy them? Imagine spending your entire life in a cage and suddenly being shown a place where there are no bars. Imagine seeing grass for the first time while knowing you will never touch it. Imagine learning that the air you have breathed your entire life is dirty only after someone lets you smell clean air. Maybe hope is not always kindness. Maybe sometimes hope is another form of torture. I think about that because I understand what it means to be shown things I cannot reach. The world shows us everything. It never stops. We see beautiful bodies and perfect faces. We see enormous houses, clear oceans, untouched forests, expensive clothes, peaceful families, happy couples, and people traveling through countries we may never visit. We see versions of ourselves that could exist if only everything about our lives had happened differently. And then we put the phone down. We close the computer. We look around. The room is still the same. The body is still the same. The life is still waiting. Sometimes I wonder whether people understand how strange that is. We have created machines that can show us almost every kind of life imaginable, but most of us still wake up and return to the same little spaces. We work, we eat, we sleep, we repeat. People call this freedom because the walls are far enough apart that we cannot always see them. I am not sure I believe that anymore. We are told we can become anything. Then we are given bills, jobs, responsibilities, illness, bodies with limits, families with expectations, governments with laws, companies that need workers, landlords who need rent, banks that need payments, stores that need customers. Everyone needs something. The world seems less like a place designed for people and more like an enormous machine that uses them. You are born, and almost immediately the machine begins telling you what you will need to become. Learn this, study that, behave properly, find work, earn money, buy things, pay debts, start a family, work more, grow old, die. People call it normal, because almost everyone does it. But animals in cages probably think the walls are normal too. That does not make the cage disappear. Maybe I am being dramatic. People have said that before. They tell me life is what you make of it. They tell me I should be grateful. They tell me to stop thinking so much. Sometimes I wish I could. Thinking is exhausting. There are days when I envy people who move through life without constantly examining it. They wake up, go to work, laugh with friends, watch television, sleep, and do it again. Maybe they have found the secret. Maybe the secret is not to ask what any of it means. I have never been able to do that. Every ordinary thing opens another door in my head. Take food. Someone puts meat on a plate and sees dinner. I see the animal. I see the cage. I imagine the smell. I imagine the floor covered in filth. I imagine fear. I imagine workers whose job is to move living things toward death again and again until the act becomes ordinary. Then the meat is cleaned, cut, wrapped, placed inside bright packages beneath cold supermarket lights. Everything ugly is hidden. That is what humans are best at. We hide the process. We love the result and refuse to look at how it was made. Maybe we do the same thing with ourselves. We package our lives carefully. Nice clothes, smiling photographs, clean rooms when visitors come, polite conversations. We hide the fear. We hide the loneliness. We hide how tired we are. We hide the things we hate about ourselves. Then we walk outside, pretending that everything is fine. Sometimes I wonder whether civilization is simply a more complicated slaughterhouse. Not because everyone is being physically killed, but because everything seems built around turning life into something useful for someone else. We give our hours, our strength, our attention, our bodies, our patience. Then, eventually, there is nothing left to give. We grow older while pretending we are working towards some future moment when everything will finally feel worth it. That future keeps moving. One more year, one more paycheck, one more promotion, one more purchase, one more achievement, one more relationship, one more attempt. Round and round. A merry-go-round powered by hope. That is what frightens me. Hope is supposed to be beautiful. Sometimes it feels like the drug that keeps the machine running. We keep going because we believe something better is coming. Maybe it is. Maybe that belief saves people. But what if it does not? What happens when you spend your whole life waiting for a door that never opens? I have often felt as though I was born with something wrong at the center of me. Not evil, not broken exactly, just misplaced. As if whatever part of me is truly me was supposed to go somewhere else and somehow ended up inside this life by accident. I do not remember choosing this body. No one does. That should be obvious. But sometimes the obvious things are the most terrifying. You appear. Suddenly you are alive. You are inside flesh. You have bones, teeth, skin, organs, pain, hunger, needs. You have a face that other people will judge before they know anything about you. You have a body that will decide what you can and cannot do. And you had no say in any of it. People tell you to love yourself. I have always found that strange. Would you tell someone to love a house they were trapped inside simply because it belonged to them? Maybe some people are lucky. They look into the mirror and see something that matches the person they imagine themselves to be. I envy them. When I look at myself, I often feel as though I am wearing someone else's shape. I understand that this body is mine. I know that, logically. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. The body is difficult to maintain. It gets tired. It becomes dirty. It sweats. It aches. It becomes sick. Hair grows where I do not want it. Skin changes. Teeth hurt. Muscles weaken. Bones can break. Everything needs constant care just to remain functional. And even if you do everything correctly, eventually the body destroys itself anyway. Age comes. Cells fail. Organs weaken. The machine falls apart. That is supposed to be natural. Nature is another word people use when they do not know how to make something sound less horrifying. Disease is natural. Pain is natural. Predators are natural. Parasites are natural. A creature being eaten alive is natural. Nature gives life and then spends the rest of that life trying to take it back. Maybe that is why I cannot find comfort in being told something is natural. I would rather have been able to design myself. That thought has followed me for years. If I had to exist, why could I not at least choose the form? Why could I not decide what I looked like? Why could I not choose bones that did not hurt? A body that did not feel like a responsibility I never asked for? Why could I not choose how tall I was, how strong I was, what my face looked like, whether I became sick? If consciousness can imagine a better shape, why must it remain trapped inside the one chance gave it? I can imagine so many bodies I would rather have. Some barely human, some not human at all. Something stronger, cleaner, something that does not age, something that does not need to eat another living thing to continue, something without organs quietly waiting to fail, something that could move through the world without being constantly reminded that it is made of meat. People do not like that word. Meat. They prefer body, flesh, skin. Those words sound personal. Meat sounds like what we actually are. Worn biological material arranged temporarily into a person. It frightens people because it removes the illusion. I am a mind carried around by meat and bones. So are you. We try to make it beautiful. We decorate ourselves. Perfume, makeup, clothes, jewelry, haircuts, everything carefully arranged so we can forget what is underneath. Perhaps that is why death unsettles people so deeply. A dead body removes the performance. There is no personality protecting it anymore. No movement. No conversation. You are forced to see the material without the person. And then you understand how thin the difference was. I do not want to hate life. That is something I need to make clear, even if I am only saying it to myself. There are things here I love. That almost makes everything worse. If there were nothing beautiful, then leaving emotionally would be easy. But there is music. There are certain voices I could listen to forever. There is rain against windows. There are animals sleeping safely beside people they trust. There are quiet conversations at night. There is the feeling of someone remembering something small about you. There are stories that stay inside your mind for years. There is laughter so sudden it hurts. There are moments when the light through trees makes the entire world look new. There is love. I wish there were not. Love is the chain I cannot hate. If I cared about nothing, perhaps I could move through this world more easily. I could use it, take what comfort I could find, protect myself, build something small, and never worry about anything beyond it. But people taught me to love. Maybe they did not mean to. Parents, friends, strangers, animals, characters in stories, people who came and went. They taught me attachment. They taught me what it feels like to want someone to remain. Then they taught me the other half of love. Fear, once you love something, you become afraid of losing it. Every beautiful thing develops a shadow. A person you love can leave, a pet can die, a home can burn, a friendship can disappear, a body can fail, a memory can fade. Love does not remove suffering. It gives suffering names. Sometimes I imagine the opposite. Nothing, not death exactly, just absence, a void without sound, without light, without hunger, without responsibility, without other people wanting things from me, without a body needing to be washed and fed and protected. No expectations, no future, no past, no noise. There is something beautiful about that silence. But if the silence lasted forever, would it become lonely? That is the question that ruins even the void. I only understand loneliness because I have known company. I only understand silence because I have heard music. I only understand darkness because I have seen light. Once you know something, you cannot become innocent again. That may be the real curse. Knowledge does not disappear just because it hurts. The animal that has never seen the field might live calmly inside the cage. Show it the field once, and perhaps the walls become unbearable. I think someone showed me the field. I do not know who. Maybe the internet did it. Maybe stories did. Maybe imagination itself is the problem. My mind can build places better than this one. It can create worlds where bodies are chosen instead of assigned, where work exists because someone wants to create something, not because they are afraid of becoming homeless, where animals are not bred in cages, where no one is born into suffering because someone else decided life must continue, where love does not always end in loss, where no one looks into a mirror and feels trapped behind their own face. These worlds are not real, but they feel close enough to hurt. Sometimes I spend hours inside them. Not literally. I know where I am. I know the room around me is real, but my thoughts move somewhere else. I imagine a home, not a huge one. I do not need wealth, just somewhere that feels mine. A place built around comfort instead of survival. Clean air, soft light, a window looking toward something green. No advertisements, no traffic, no screaming machines, no one measuring my usefulness. People I chose around me, people who chose me too. Animals that were not afraid. Food that did not require suffering. A body that felt like an extension of myself instead of a cage I had to carry. I could make my own little box. Maybe that is all anyone is trying to do. Build a smaller cage inside the larger one and decorate it until it feels like freedom. A home, a family, a bedroom, a garden, a routine. People take the vast, uncontrollable horror of existence and create one tiny place where they can pretend they have control. Maybe there is nothing wrong with that. Maybe that is what I should do. Build my box carefully. Choose who enters. Fill it with things that make existence softer. Music, books, plants, animals. People who do not demand that I become someone else. Perhaps satisfaction does not have to mean loving the entire world. Maybe it only means creating one corner of it that does not hurt as much. I think about that when the fantasies become too strong, when I see some imagined life and feel myself being pulled toward it. I remind myself that the fantasy is clean because it is not real. Real places have dust. Real bodies ache. Real relationships become complicated.